Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Steve Lentini, and I'm the host for the podcast Different Thinking for Different Times. And this is Season 6, Episode 17. And I have a real treat for you today. You're going to meet Ed Rahill, who's on the screen, as you can see. And Ed has a fascinating story to tell. He's written a book about it. And I went out and bought the book the minute we booked a podcast. And little did I know, and he's a generous guy, because a week or so later he said, "Hey, what's your address? Can I send you a book?" I said, I already bought one. And you're going to learn about his approach to life and how he got there and how he overcame some amazing obstacles and what he learned from previous generations who didn't push often beyond into some of the challenges or similar challenges like Ed did. And so this podcast is about pushing beyond, right? Small-minded, acorn brain thoughts that aren't true. I like to say when that brain speaks up, well, that's a thought, not a fact. I have to remind it. And then I sometimes talk to myself in the you. There's some new neural research that if you want to have the power of affirmations, instead of saying I am, you say you're healthy, you're smart, you're caring, you're compassionate. Talk to yourself when that voice gets really active. Now, I've been testing that. I think it is helpful. And so what I really like to do is interview people and let them share their experiences so people can learn from it, because that's what we're here to do. And without further ado, I want you to meet Ed Rahill, and he's the author of 1 Mile at a Time. It's a great cover. And it's the subtitle is A Memoir of the Last Great American Road Race, which fascinated me because I'm a car guy, and the adventure we call life, right? So he combines the way he was living, and it might have been a fast life to some, and maybe to Ed at the time. I can tell you it's an amazing adventure. And if you like those kind of stories, you're going to really love this book. All right. So, Ed, where do you want to start? Tell us about yourself and your family and before you got to the book and the Great American Race. Give us some background.
Well, thank you, Steve. I'm thrilled to be here with you and your audience. I'm very grateful for that.
I'm grateful that you're a guest. Yes.
I'm Ed Rahill. I grew up in upstate New York, a little town called Gardenville, raised by my grandmother, who was an amazing woman, human being. It was a result of a broken marriage we were in a situation where my mother needed to work. We needed to move in with family. It occurred quite often, but that was the beginning of the transformation of me into what I am today, because she effectively raised me from the time I was 7 years old. To give you an idea of the relationship, we would call my mother and call her mom. So that gives you the way it would work. It wasn't an insult to my mother. It was just the way she operated.
The way that.
Yeah. And she's doing, I think she was doing with me in trying to tell me the story of her life, the story of our ancestors' lives and the people that came before us, because she wanted to teach something. In the book, I go into it, and you're 7, 8, 9 years old, and you're getting these lectures about you're going to face adversity, and this is how you had taken on. I mean, and you need to develop resiliency, and I didn't know what the word meant. I mean, it was just one of those things, but she was very diligent about it. And in a sense, the reason I wrote this book is I think it's time for me to try to do for my family and others what was done for me by her, and that's transfer the wisdom of life, the mistakes, the successes, and lessons from prior generations to help you become the best it can be in an evolving way. And at the end of the book, this isn't giving any away, I refer to, if I was to explain people how I view life, I view it in a track analogy as a mile relay with runners running each section, and that our lives are very much like that we're born, raised, we're standing at the starting line, and then someone gives us a baton and we have to go out and run with that. Now, it's our gift of life that we got that baton, and we have to live it the best we can become the best people we can, run as fast as we can to make it to the end. But then there's going to come a time when you're making the fourth turn towards that finish line again. You need to start reflecting on does your life mean? And how do I do about it? And your goal at that time is to hand off the baton to the next generation so they can grow and become more. And I tried to explain to people, especially today, I think there's a little bit of dearth in the education system on this, but we're here today having this conversation because of what people of generations prior to us did. This camera, internet, the whole thing was invented by a previous generation. And that is how the human race became better, more civilized, hopefully better human beings.
Sure.
Because we learned from the past. We learned about, everybody from Genghis Khan to Hitler, and that's the bad. You learn about, Mother Teresa, and those are the goods. And you kind of start crafting your society and your life around what was good and unrecognizing what was bad. So that was kind of the goal of the book.
And science is starting to back that up so that people become more realistic about negative experiences and negative thinking. Here's what they're saying today is that for us to make ourselves wrong because we have a negative thought, no, because we'd still be in caves if someone didn't have a negative thought about this cave living sucks. And his point was that we keep advancing because we have a complaint. We have a negative thought. The key is, he said, to do something about it, which is fascinating in your story, is to advance by taking action. So anyway, I just wanted to add that in.
Well, I think that's right, spot on. It's the point that I wanted to drive at is that my family history was what my grandmother called a chain of broken dreams. Her mother came over at 14 years old from Ireland, became a maid on Delaware Avenue in Buffalo, and never saw her siblings again.
Wow!
And so she did meet her husband, and my grandmother was born. But by the time my grandmother was in 5th grade, she had to leave school to help support the family. And her job was walking the railroad yards in South Buffalo, picking up loose coal to sell.
Wow.
And it was a good job. I mean, because people wanted it. And so that's kind of where she went. And then, she saw her dreams come, to have a family. She married my grandfather, had 4 kids, stay-at-home mom. He was an entrepreneur. He convinced Ford Motor to let him start a dealership in upstate New York.
Wow.
And at 36, he dies. So she's got 4 kids, 5th grade education, and she's in the middle of the Depression, 1936. She has no savings at all, went into the business, didn't have a clue how to survive. Just put yourself in that situation.
Wow.
There's no safety net. There's no welfare. There's no food stamps. I mean, this is really tough. And to make it worse, she would prey on it. But to make it worse, a few weeks later, the district manager from Ford comes by and says, Ann, I'm sorry about your loss, but we have to sell the dealership to somebody else. We need a man to run this. That's what they told me. And you can see where she was on this, as far as this is where she gained, I think, her faith, because she had no way out, and she just prayed. She says, I can't do it myself. That's what she would explain to me. But in the book, there's a lot goes on, but there's a telegram I have a copy of in the book from the executive vice president of Ford for the Eastern region, complimenting her on her performance. And he copies all the dealers in New York and basically says, after Ann's been able to do it in the 18 months, maybe it's time for me to go out and find some single mothers to run these things. Yeah. And so but that's the kind of thing she wanted to transfer to me. This is how she dealt with it. Because she put a burden on me. I didn't realize it, but she wanted me to take the next generation and make sure they never have to give up their dreams again. And that was the goal. Only by being a good husband and father is being a good provider and protector. Your job is to make sure they are protected, they have a safe, nurturing environment. And that's kind of the direction I took on that. Now, the book, that was just kind of give you a handle on the core of what I became and how my life changed with that kind of input as a young boy. And that influenced my life through successes and failures. And I've had my failures. But the book is also something I wanted to tell a story about. I operated 2 or 3 different levels in it. The first level is about American history. And the book starts out explaining the whole concept of endurance racing. It started in 1860 with the Pony Express trying to cross the United States, most of the United States, as fast as they could to deliver mail. It wasn't a race, but they got the juices going. The Civil War happened, that ended that. And then afterwards, after the Civil War, was the age of the cowboy, the expansion west. And a new, and there were quite a few young men who basically either were soldiers that didn't have a future anymore, or just went out there and they'd buy their own horse, gun, and saddle, and they would migrate from ranch to ranch or whatever to work. And part of that culture, they developed contests, and one of them was horseback riding and racing. This became quite a thing between 1870 and 1893. They were up to 1,000-mile races that they were. Wow. And the last race was called the Great Cowboy Race, 1893, a race to Chicago that was sponsored by Buffalo Bill Cody. And the winner was going to be rewarded a gold-plated Colt 45, and it happened. But that was also the last race of that type. It really, the age of the railroad, barbed wire, and no longer developing cattle drives. Everything was done, through rail. The cowboy really wasn't really needed that much. No. However, the spirit of the cowboy didn't end, because in 1905, a bunch of young guys got together in New York City and said, "We're going to race across the country. Do you want to do it?" And they started a race from New York to Portland. It became quite famous at the time. And the team that won, 2 men, in 44 days, were able to come in. The second place team came in 4 or 5 days later. And in the book, you'll see I drove out to Oregon and found 2 monuments that were erected to this race by the state of Oregon, honoring it as the first cross-continental endurance road race ever run. Back then, that was the type, people were fascinated by this. They were fascinated about it. They had an imagination, that maybe they could do it. And so that was really the beginning of it. And I go through how it evolved through the early 20th century with Cannonball Baker, then how Brock Yates, Edward car drivers reintroduced the Cannonball Run. And then finally, when the Prestons out of Boston did the granddaddy of them all, which was 4 races called the 4-Bowl Rally, of which I ran twice and had a tremendous amount of success with. And that kind of...
How did you come to the decision to do the road race? The last great American road race, in fact.
Well, it turned out it was, and I can get into that. It's never been done since, for reasons that make sense when we go over it. Yeah. But I grew up in my grandmother's house, and she had a Ford dealership. I had at 14, I had to go down and work, cut grass and everything. The long and short of it, I loved cars. We didn't know it, but like when the first Ford Mustangs came out, they hid the cars in my family's garage, and we'd go out and play with them. But the point was I was cutting grass on a June early morning, and a couple of salesmen told me to come in. There was something on the radio. It turned out to be the 24 Hours Le Mans. When the second time Carroll Shelby finally took over and just basically beat the hell out of Ferrari 1, 2, and 3. And I became fascinated by what I was hearing. Up to then, I just never found appealing the concept of going around a track for 4 hours. I mean, I'm just talking about never captured my imagination. So NASCAR has never really captured my imagination. Formula One hasn't either, because it's weaving around a small track.
Right. But
the idea of getting out on an open road, running as fast as you can, as far as you can, not knowing what the next turn is going to be, just seemed like an adventure. So that got my going. I had quite a bit of skill development in upstate New York with having access to quite a few cars.
Mm-hmm.
I'd work there. I'd be a lot boy. I'd be able to take one home.
Mm-hmm.
The sales manager wasn't there, so I'd take the Mustang instead of the Falcon. And I would that was an important part of it. But the long and short of it, I never really looked at it as something I wanted to do as an occupation. I was focused in on getting an education, going to school, being able to generate a solid business background and be ready to take on the challenge with a family.
Mm-hmm.
It just so happened that in the course of it, I always stayed with racing. I'd go to Watkins Glen once in a while to do a 2 or 3 day course so that I can understand it. Skip Barber was another organization I would go to. And that's how I stayed good with it, but it was by accident. Basically, a friend of mine, I was working in Chicago, a friend of mine was working in another department. His cousin was a semi-pro race car driver, and he had been invited to attend the 4-ball rally. And basically, he couldn't do it, but he referred me, which I was honored with. And through his referral, I was able to get in and begin the process of the first year learning how to do it, the second year winning. So it was that's how it kind of got evolved. But it was important for you to understand, your listeners. It was never my life. This is why my kids never knew anything about this, because I always looked, I got another phase to go to. And so I captured that in the book. It was amazing. It set a new world's record. Got arrested twice, court once, broke down, last place. And, I had an epiphany of a breakdown because I was coming off a very personal thing for the prior year. And I was able to have a transformation through a reflection during that race that turned me out from being incapable of doing what I had to do to win, to basically just going into a gear I never even thought I had.
What was that thought? What was the switch that went on?
It started out in the depth of being crushing. The moment there was a very important woman in my life that I broke up with. I mean, it was heading towards marriage. We even were naming our kids. And a lot of things were going down. It was hard for me to let go. And, some stuff came out. There were people saying that I didn't have what it takes. She actually said that to a friend. And when we were breaking down, arrested in last place, she was right. I wasn't the man I used to be. And it was a period of pulling over to the road and reflecting, actually getting out and actually shedding a tear. And then remembering my youth. And it was my grandmother's words to me. And then remembering a very significant event that occurs in the beginning of the book, which is basically a mile relay, where I ended up being the anchor back 100 yards behind everybody else. In the book, you'll find out what happened. But it was like, you've been here before.
I won't spoil it for everyone.
You've been here before. And it was really a spiritual awakening. The reason why I'm saying that is that I literally went out of body a few times. First, when I was driving, that's why I pulled over. But it was like I was looking at the road in the car, but it was like I was looking at it from a distance. And it was a spiritual experience. And all it was trying to do is get me in touch with what I was. And that basically, I ended up getting in that car just at the Mississippi, and I averaged 137 miles an hour from St. Louis to Adrian, Texas. And it was I didn't even know that's how fast I was going. And then I basically stopped to turn over. My partner who had passed out from sleep. And I fell to the floor, out of the ground. I could not get up. He had to carry me into the car. There was just that mission to do something. And that began the whole process of getting back in the race. And then there was a lot of fun after that. We ended up having an adventure with a Highway Patrol Bell helicopter in California, which the book will talk about. But it really was, what it really was, it taught me a lesson about perseverance and how close you come to giving up. I mean, if I had just To give you an idea, if I hadn't opened up my mind for that couple of minutes, I would have headed north to Chicago and go home. And if we hadn't put the effort in like we did in the second half of the race, I only won by 10 minutes.
Wow.
35 hours, 46 minutes, 2,300, 3,200 miles. And all I had to do was go 1 mile an hour slower or hang around 10 more minutes feeling sorry for myself. And it wouldn't have happened.
Right.
And so that is something in life that I think people need to learn, is that sometimes it's worth hanging in there 1 more minute.
Yeah. Well, and there's a few other things that are interesting to me. In chapter 7, you wrote, everyone deserves a break.
Yep.
And this may be digressing a little bit, but I think it's important. So talk about that.
It really is more, everybody gets a break.
Yeah.
In their lives.
Yeah.
It's whether you're aware enough to see it when it's staring you in the face.
Yeah.
And, that was a divergence between my love life and my career, because I had an opportunity to go to Mexico as part of a State Department sponsored group to go try to help find out if Mexico and Latin America can avoid bankruptcy. And it was a small group, and I was asked to go because of my unique background, but I was still a wet behind the ears guy. I was the youngest guy on that team that ended up going, and it was a challenge where we were going to trying to figure out what was the condition of the economy down there, specifically how bad the situation was for Mexican firms, and what do we do to protect the banks, because we weren't working for the banks that they don't lose their money. And it was an event where I changed my direction on that whole thing after some spiritual recognition. I got to know the people of a company called Industrious and the Cobra. I got to know and go to their house for dinner. And I all of a sudden realized the human stuff going on here. It wasn't numbers anymore. And I elected to take a stance that was opposite of what everybody in the task force was doing, which was liquidation. Sell the inventory, basically. And I brought up something that a term I hadn't heard until COVID, supply chain issues, meaning lag time. And the situation was, I tried to point out that you can go liquidate everything, these businesses right now, but what happens in the next year and a half when the economy recovers? There's all your other debt's going to go bankrupt because they don't have any resources. And that work, I was more like a catalyst, because nobody wanted to take me seriously because I was an analyst and they were executives.
It was innovative.
It was innovative, but what happened is that the guy who was running it was a class act, and he basically told everybody that I was to continue to work on that while they worked on something else. And all I did was lobby with them to help them become their idea. It's not me. No, this isn't Ed Rahill. This is the right thing to do. And what happened was, gradually a number of them just started adopting it as their idea, and it went. It taught me a lot. There's a famous,
you helped funding people see it differently as well.
Because they looked at it, I was the only one with a manufacturing background. They were all finance. But it reminds me of that Ronald Reagan plaque he had on his desk. You'd be surprised what you can get done if you don't mind who takes the credit. And I learned that.
Very true. Yeah. So how did that experience connect to the racing, do you think? What was important about all of that? Because you did get a break. It made a big difference in your life. That break,
it made
right?
a tremendous difference. I didn't see it. All I know is that I needed to patch up my relationship with the woman I was in love with, and I was in Mexico and I wasn't there. And she broke up with me. Started dating somebody else. It basically, the situation that I think men sometimes face when they're starting to mature a little bit, or not quite mature, is that when you get into your first relationship that really seems like it's it, the commitment level is so deep that the breaking of it is something you don't get over right away. Men have been through, and women have been through a few relationships. They know how to suck it up. They've been there. But that was something that resulted in me taking the soul of my desire to do anything. I had to struggle just to get my job done right. And I didn't have what it took to be a race. But I had already signed up. We had been sponsored by GM. And during the race, the first half, Tim, my partner, recognized there was a problem. But it was really, it's just what happens to a human being when he's recovering. And then I talked about the transformation when I let it go, and then remembered who I was and what I had done, and I could do it again. That brought me back to who I was and resulted in it. And it ended up being, it ended up being an unbelievable experience. I can't tell you how much publicity we got. Became a bit of a celebrity in my hometown of Barrington, Illinois. I couldn't walk down the street without somebody stopping to talk to me. I get arrested by the police and taken down to the station because I was not supposed to have a driver's license because they found whoever ran the state, the attorney general wanted to teach me a lesson in Illinois, even though I was arrested there. But they basically sat down. Okay, now tell us about this thing. He said, "Well, you got a couple $100." I said, "This will get you out of this jail." I said, "No." I said, "Well, just go down to the bank, take your ATM, come back in 20 minutes." They didn't really care. But the point was, it was one of those relationships that was amazing. And I never intended being a celebrity, but I do remember with a reporter in San Diego asking me, "Am I going to do additional events around the United States around me?" And I said, "I don't want this event to be the one thing I remembered." Because that was not my goal. My goal was now, I've accomplished something that was a dream. It's time, you've done the dream, it's time to move on. And that's why I never talked about it with anyone after the event.
Well, and you had some interesting experiences during the event, too.
Yeah.
Is there anyone in particular you want to talk about? I mean, I have one that I read, but I'll let you choose.
Well, there's my favorite one. I have two favorite ones. The California run was more of a relief that we were able to pull ourselves out of that and not get arrested. But there's two. One's in upstate New York and one's in Ohio. I think Ohio's my favorite. But get pulled over in upstate New York. It was like several squad cars all at once had been lining up and came out. They couldn't get us for speeding because we had radar jamming equipment. And so they basically ended up on the car. They found a Bearcat scanner in the car, arrested me because I'm the owner, went to court, and brought before a judge. And she was it was a Saturday, was summer day, and she had an outfit on. She says, "Now I'm going to a wedding in a couple hours. So let's get to this." And the trial went just unbelievable. The trooper was told, "Well, we discovered this receiver in the car, and he's able to listen to radio frequencies, and that's putting us in danger." And she looked at me, "Well, what do you have to say for yourself?" I said, "Well, under the 1934 Congressional Act passed by Congress, every American citizen has the right to receive radio broadcasts. They cannot broadcast without a license." And she just grinned, looked at the cop, came back to me, and said, "He's right, get him back to his car." So that was one of my, and the other one was Sergeant Roger Teague of the Ohio State Police. It was another case where he was going one way and we were coming another. He hit us. We were doing 120. Tim hit the jamming equipment again, and they ended up pulling us over. I ended up pulling over to the side of the road because I saw him coming around with the lights on, waiting for him. First time I realized there was something unusual. There's two ways you're supposed to deal with a cop: either both hands on the steering wheel, and I believe you lower the window. They get really pissed if you lower the window. But I chose to take the license registration and put both outside. And he's 20 feet away. He says, "Oh, that's okay, Mr. Rahill. Why don't you come back to my car? We'll talk." And how the hell does he know who I am? He had a copy of the All Points Bulletin that had been sent up in the state of New York across the entire United States, identifying us in the race and who they needed to be going after. And he just said, this is my day off. But when I heard you guys were running, basically, I just volunteered to come in. And the long and short of it, he said, "Now I was trying to figure out how to write you up. But, it said 56 on that radar gun. I wonder how that happened. But he said, by the way, I noticed when you pull over the side of the road, you didn't use a turn signal. That's a lane change. He said, now this is another 25 minutes. This is like Monopoly. Mm-hmm. And sort of this is what he said. You're going to jail, lose one turn. And then I'm going to let you go. But do not go speeding in my zone or I'll come back after you again. Mm-hmm. And in the book, there's a picture of him. He ended up arresting 3 other racers, including myself. We had a tradition in the 4-ball rally the 4 times that we would determine who was the best cop out there. He got the Super Trooper Award. Well, you know what the SOB did? He showed up with his wife to collect it and get the trophy. And then he sent us a copy. Tim had it. Trooper magazine. In the back, there's a full-page picture of him, the trophy, and a couple of cops congratulating him on winning the Super Trooper Award. It was a time in America when, because they looked at that stuff differently. The reason why there were so many movies of that period that were popular is because mm-hmm. the American imagination was the freedom to go out and do something like that. Mm-hmm. Times were changing. Mm-hmm. We even had 2 members of the racers were state troopers from Texas. They just, so there was a different attitude about this, and that ended for a lot of reasons. Mostly because the amount of enforcement that was coming up because of the publicity. The year before they did 5 minutes on NBC Nightly News with Douglas Kiker and everything, and they embedded a reporter with us and ended up doing the whole thing. Well, that kind of energized the entire police force of the United States, and so they were coming down hard on it. Mm-hmm. And some of the less friendly states like California, New York, we're really looking at multiple jail time and encouraging lawsuits. Mm-hmm. And so it really became financially, and it was no longer an adventure. It really became a difficult thing to do. When you're running 30 to 50 cars across the United States, it's hard to hide.
Yeah.
And
and then there were the times you were weaving in and out of traffic at over 100 miles an hour.
Always break and go. At least east of Mississippi. But you do not pass anybody over 20 miles an hour. And so you hammer it down, hit your brakes, downshift, go, then gas it up again, and you're gone.
After you pass, right.
And it's a technique where at the time with the type of car we had and what was going on, different racing experience, 20 miles an hour gives you enough time to react. The event, something goes on, sudden lane change, things along that line. Mm-hmm. You're doing 50 or 60, you can't react. You're just plowing into somebody. Yeah. So in a sense, the safety ways we wanted to make sure that the only people that gave us trouble were 18-wheelers who were weaving back and forth on purpose, playing cat and mouse.
The black,
that was an experience.
Yeah.
There have been some
well thought out. The whole process was well thought out. I mean, you couldn't avoid getting stopped and arrested in certain places, but still, the thought of safety on the open roads was important, and it was thought out. I was impressed.
You have in that time, in that period, that was the only way. And during that the 4-ball rally ran 4 times. Mm-hmm. The sponsors were very diligent about selecting people. Mm-hmm. They do background checks to make sure that they and there's never any accidents going on. Mm-hmm. But the attitude really was understanding. You may know what you're doing behind the wheel of a car, but the other person on the road may.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right, it's true. You don't know what they'll do either, right?
No, and I teach people in the book how to drive a race car. Mm-hmm. I talk about trail braking. I talk about crisis management that we really had to do in Ohio when there was multi-car pileup. Mm-hmm. Literally.
Right, you were stuck in traffic for hours, right? You were stuck in traffic.
Oh, what it is that there's a car in front of you and they're spinning. Mm-hmm. You look at their wheels. If their wheels are moving, you aim for the car and accelerate. It will not be there when you get it. If the wheels are not spinning, if they're locked up, they're going to go in a straight line. Mm-hmm. And so, those are little things that we've learned. I learned over the years from race coaching and that type of thing that I try to explain in the book. And also, I explain what break and go means, how you handle that. and why you do it, but also explain what it does to your engine and your transmission and your brakes.
Well, I won't be using any of those skills I read about in the New York traffic jams.
No,
some of the things that you guys did was fascinating, right? And you had to, right? You had to come up with, and you did it safely. You did it with some imagination and creativity.
Yeah, thank you. It was, and there was luck involved, but there was also making the right decisions at the right time when it would have been easy to go in a different direction.
Or quit or give up. Yeah.
And so that combined with what happened to me in Mexico, 18 months after Mexico, I was recruited to become vice president and officer of Bell Outcome. And I would have sit in the executive meetings. I said, why the hell am I here? I don't have these guys' experience. But the reputation I had built in Mexico, this is where the career, I'm saying everybody gets a break in their lives recognizing it.
Yeah.
That changed my projectile, my course for the rest of my life. That one event that where I just did what I thought I needed to do, and then handled it with probably much more maturity than I would think I would have at the time, to make sure that the people I'm arguing with are not against them. I'm going to help them figure it out so that become their ownership. And that's helped me a lot as I became CEO of a company. I found that it's the people that work for you make the difference, and the way you keep them enthused, you let them think it's their project they're working on. I may come up with, but this is yours. They have to have ownership in it, or you're never gonna take it on. Or people should be cutting out 5 to 5 because they don't want to be at work anymore.
Yeah. Now, what would your grandmother say to everyone? What would you want to share to everyone that's either going to get the book? Tell us how to get the book, by the way. This is a good time to do that.
Yeah. The book is for sale on Amazon, 1 Mile at a Time. It's in hardcover and paperback. And it's also at Barnes & Noble. Some of them have it, some don't. I'm going on a book tour this summer.
Great.
Basically, I have an ebook out. I'm in the process of completing an audiobook and a book in Spanish. And I'm going to do a second edition launching once those are done. To kind of, I've started a firm called 1 Mile Productions. I've just hired a couple of people, including a marketing director, and she's responsible for helping launch this. I decided that I just was really never able to get publishers like Simon Schuster and that to take this seriously, because I'm not a experienced writer. So I'm doing what I did when I started business. I'm hiring people. I'm creating my own assignments. I'm getting, I got a marketing person that's a knockout, and we're gonna take it. We're gonna do advertising. We're gonna do road shows, as many podcasts as I can, and then we're gonna target going out to the West Coast in the fourth quarter. I want at least 2 studios that I'm negotiating with on a movie rights, so I can.
It would be a great movie.
I appreciate that. I hope so. But the reason why I'm pushing this, and it's I'm pushing the concept. I want the world to understand some of the wisdom of the past and understand where this country and the people in it came from. We don't have a connection with our roots anymore, but there's a lot of connection in this book. And it doesn't mean that we're sacrificing our identity, our self-actualization, as I said with the relay race. No, that's your job.
Right.
But you need to appreciate the runner before you, what he or she did that puts you in a position to do this.
Yeah.
And when you do that, life becomes a lot more wonderful, because you look at it as a continuum. And it doesn't have an end, really. It has a continuum, at least for whatever term the universe can survive.
Yeah.
And so that's the kind of the theme that I'm trying to get across.
Yeah. Yeah. And if they go to Amazon and Google 1 Mile at a Time or Ed Rahill, Rahill, you can see it on the screen. They should find you, right? And
I have a webpage that's www.edwardrahill.com, EDWARDRAHILL.
Here, I'll show everybody again the book cover, and you can see how to spell on the bottom there, Edward, E-W. Yeah, E-D-W-A-R-D, Edward.
Yep.
Rahill.
R-A-H-I-L-L.
There you go. R-A-H, there we go. That's a little better right there. ILL.com. right?
God bless you. Yep.
So what would your grandmother say to everybody if she was here?
I know that she would be extremely pleased because I became the kind of human being she was hoping I would.
Mm-hmm.
Not a perfect one, you know, but the thing is,
Who
I
is?
think that no is, but she said one thing at the end of her life.
Mm-hmm.
She said at the end of life, there's two things she asked me. I said, she called me Mike as my middle name because there were so many Eds in the family.
Mm-hmm.
But she said, if I had to do it all over again, I wish I had two lives to live. One to learn by and one to live.
Mm.
And the second thing she said, this is a few years before she died, says, you'll know at the end you lived a good life if you can honestly say at the end that the world is a better place because you were here.
Yeah.
So that's when I try to get down to the kernel of the book, if I had to say one thing, I would probably capture that phrase, make sure the world's a better place. And she would say, it doesn't matter how much better, it just needs to be better.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's the purpose of the podcast, right? What I say to everyone is leave everything and everyone a little better than you find them. That would change the world, right? One moment at a time. And then to do good. As the listeners of the podcast over the 6 years know, the only thing mentioned in my life review, and this is my experience, I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything, was the good I had done. The good I had done. And that makes sense to me because when I ask people to this day, since that day, for 22 years and 5 months, I ask people, how do you feel when you do good? They feel good. Except for one guy. One guy said to me, yes, I feel good. He was reluctant to announce that he felt good, maybe because there was an audience. Still, we feel good when we do good, and we're here to make mistakes. No sin, at least in my experience, was mentioned, and I certainly had a few, was because we're here to do good. And mistakes are going to be made. So I don't know if anyone out there learned how to walk without falling, and that's life all through all of our journeys. So, Ed, it has been fascinating. I urge everyone to consider 1 mile at a time. Go get the book. It's a fun read. There's so many stories in it about how he applied what his grandmother taught him and then his growth throughout the journey, and including the impact of relationships and the impact of the race itself and what he learned. And so it's an experience to read it. I love it. And
Thank you.
I haven't completed it yet. I can tell you what page I on. I have it folded over. 27.
I've got newspaper articles, copies.
Sager's Little Victory started to play. That's where I left off. Seeger's Little Victory.
That was, I had headphones on at night. It just helped kept me going at the time I was charged.
Yeah.
But thank you. And I want to thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome.
It's a delight. I hope that I can get, I do hope that this will be a success, not for monetary reasons. It's part of my mission in life as I'm turning the fourth corner in the relay race.
Yeah.
The book is part of the baton I want to hand off.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's made a mark on me.
Thank you.
So remember that. You're welcome. And I'm grateful we met.
Me too. I'm fascinated to learn about your story too.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'm grateful, and I'm telling you that this is going to make a difference for people. It's going to make a difference. Ed, and your grandmother's still making a difference. All right, Ed.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Be well.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.